What up, y'all? It's your girl Ashley. I be ballin' basketball show, and I'm here to recap the national championship game, UConn versus the Gamecocks. And I thought this was gonna be a close game. I thought this was gonna be epic, close. Because a lot of the Final Four games were a lot of blowouts. So I was like, yo, this is gonna be, you know, great game. It's gonna go down to the wire. I was wrong. I was wrong. You know, I didn't really care who won. I just wanted a great game, and it was like not that. But you got to give it up to UConn because their whole team, right, was very disciplined on both ends of the floor. UConn's big three, they was shining bright. Sarah Strong, I mean, so she's only a freshman, and she can score, in the post, outside. So check this out. She's the only player, first player to ever have at least 20 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists in a championship game, y'all. And oh, also, she scored 114 points in the tournament, right? Which is the most points by a freshman to do that. She had like 3 blocks. She had two steals. She was, because, the Gamecocks, they like to, score in the paint. She was blocking those shots and even altering shots, that don't, show up in the stat sheet, right? The most valuable player. But there was a shirt that said, um, because, the saying mess around and find out. There was like fudge around and find out. That was pretty funny. And she scored 24 points, and really, she was aggressive on both ends of the floor, and she was defending too. Paige, she didn't have her best offensive game, but she still, poured in 17 points, and, she was aggressive you- she was aggressive, you know, but, she was calm, cool, and collected. She didn't care that she was missing shots. She still was, passing the ball, playmaking, getting rebounds, and she was defending as well. So 3 players signed bright for UConn, and they were two-way players playing on both ends. And so this is their 12th chip, right? And the last time they won was 2016. And, gotta give it up to Gino for dominating in different decades with different players. You gotta give it up. And oh, also Paige Becker's, the most popular player. She's going to the WNBA, gonna be the first round draft pick to the Dallas Wings. So she scored the most points by a UConn player in, an NCAA tournament. 477 points, which is, insane because she's missed, a lot of games due to her, injuries, right? So throughout her career, to score that many points in the tourney, you got to give it up. You got to give it up. Oh, also, S- Sarah Sarah Strong. For a freshman, she got a nice, because usually freshmen, they're kind of skinny, they need to get in that weight room, but she's strong, just like her last name. But check this out. She's also the first player to have 20 points, but she's scoring at a high clip. At least she scored in 3 games 60% or more, right? In the title game, in the elite game, and the semifinals. First player to ever do that and to score 20 points each. Like, come on, come on. So I want to talk about how UConn won, but also why the Gamecocks lost. And I want you guys to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, I want you guys to comment what needs to change for the Gamecocks. And I want you guys to tell me what do you think happened to the Gamecocks? And I want you guys to tell me, how do you feel about UConn and how they were very surgical out there. So what? So the first quarter, it was a close game. Gamecocks, they went like at least 3 minutes without scoring. And I was like, dang, that's crazy. It was like 19-14, right? And in the second quarter, you know, Gamecocks, they started to get a little better, right? And UConn was like facing a little bit of adversity. They probably didn't score for like 2 minutes. But then, Gino, he took a timeout and, he got his troops together. And, the first half, it was sort of close. It was like a 10-point lead at the half, and you can deal with that, really. But the third quarter was very telling, very telling. That is when UConn, they had like 26-16 run, and that made it a 20-point blowout. That third quarter, that was very telling. Fudd, she if you knew like how she was like when she first came to UConn, she was like a shooter. And she's worked on her game. She's worked on the game. She's had her injuries, but she's come back from that. And she wasn't even hitting those threes. She was taking it to the basket, right? She was very aggressive. And so I feel like they were on a mission, they were on assignment, and they were fundamental. They were very skilled. And I there's some comments that I've been reading saying that Don Staley, right, was outcoached, that she should have called more timeouts. And, she's a good recruiter, but not good at X's and O's. And here's what I've said about that. Like, sure, you could say that she was outcoached. Like, you can make those, you know, comments, because UConn, they really picked apart the defense, right? They lacked offensive punch. You could definitely say, because that was an embarrassing loss. That was embarrassing. It should have been closer for sure. But I'm not gonna say she was outcoached. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say that. And I'm gonna say this. Gino got years of more experience than Don, right? So, this whole out coaching thing, I don't know. But this is what I will say about it. And I want you guys to tell me, how do you feel about it? Um, so this is what I have to say about this. Dawn Staley, she likes the low post players. They don't really have those low post players like Boston, like, Aaliyah Boston, Asia Wilson, right? Cardoza, right? She loves size. She loves those post players. She likes to get inside the paint, right? She didn't really have that. But this is why I say you can say she was outcoached. Sure, I'll give you that. I won't argue that. But what I will say is, I'm going to tell you what I think is the biggest reason. The biggest reason to me is like, UConn had 3 stars clicking on all cylinders this whole tournament. No timeouts. People were like, oh, Don Staley should have called more timeouts. No timeouts would have, you know, helped the Gamecocks. And she's known for her players. She's known to not call timeouts so the players can figure it out. Some coaches call timeouts. Some coaches let players play through it. Every coach has their own strategies. But no timeouts would have done anything. This is what I say. I say the game could have been closer. I'll give you that. Don City could have coached a little better. The players could have, because they missed a lot of bunnies. They missed a lot of layups, right, to make the game closer. But this is what I will say. If you don't have it, you don't have it. There's no adjustments that could be made to make UConn lose this game. Could there have been maybe some adjustments to make the game closer? Sure, sure. But if you don't got it, you don't got it. And what I'm saying is there's a clear difference, right? There's a clear difference, and there's no adjustments that could have been made in this game. The adjustments really should have been made during the season, during all season, to prepare for this shining moment. Sometimes, sometimes you either gotta, like, think about it. Paige Beckers and Flood, they've been through that adversity. They've been through the injuries. They've been through the losses. And they was like, yo, we ain't losing this game. And this loss should help, these players and, with the Gamecocks to, say to themselves, hey, I should have, gotta add this to my game. I gotta adapt. This is what I will say. The players that day, this game, they can't change nothing about their game. They can't add nothing about that game. Think about it. So when you have strong Fudd and Paige Beckers, who are two-way players, by the way, right? Not only that, they're not one-dimensional players as well. They can score on different levels. Fudd is a great shooter, but she was also getting to the basket. Paige got that mid-range. She's smooth. She got the handle. She can play make strong. She's disrupting defensively. She's hitting threes. She's, getting the mid-range. I feel like Gino, he probably knows what to do in the offseason to get these players ready. It's not just about, okay, I got McDonald's All Americans. Like, everybody was criticizing Dawn. Oh, she has all these All Americans on her team. It's not fair. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's not about having a bunch of All Americans, because I think if you have a bunch of All Americans on your team, sometimes that could be a hindrance. Think about it. The All Americans, they got their own high school team, right? They probably all confident and everything. But when you get, it could either be a good thing or a bad thing. So playing with other great players, that's great, that's fine. But I feel like a, a lot of these Donald's All Americans at Gamecocks, they fit into a role, right? They fit into a role. And in the WNBA, you're going to have to fit into a role. You're going to have to be a role player sometimes, right? I feel like Gamecocks, for example, Joyce Edwards in, Malaysia. Um, I don't feel like they should have came off the bench, but even if they did, right, they came off the bench. Those should have been like UConn had three players, so therefore the Gamecocks needed at least three players to ball with those UConn players. They did not have that. So players on the Gamecocks got to work on their skills. Okay, all this pressure, UConn's defense, they was pressuring them. They humbled them. It was clamping them down, locking them down. So what do I gotta do? I gotta get in the gym and work on my game. I can't be, having all these weaknesses. I can't be one dimensional, right? You got all that talent, but sometimes it's about how are you utilizing the talent? How are you getting the talent ready for this moment? See, it's easy to play with a bunch of All Americans during the regular season, and even you're in some teams that you're just more talented than. But at the end of the day, individually, you have to work on your game. And sometimes you need those players to take over the game. Bud, right? Strong, right? Page, right? They can take over the game, but they're doing it in a team, you know, X and O's plays ways, right? And Gamecocks, they're more so, you know, they're not really X's and O's type plays like in Ucon's defense, actually prevented, the Gamecocks to do anything offensively to get into any plays, any sets. In my opinion, Edwards, Malaysia can't come off the bench anymore, and you gotta train them to be stars, not role players. I feel like sometimes when you play with all these other players, sometimes it may be a hindrance of you working on your game. Maybe you say you don't gotta work on your specific part of your game because you got all this talent on your team. But sometimes you you have to break out. And I feel like Fudd, Becker's strong. They know how to, in a team mindset, in a team way, shine. And I don't think any of those Gamecock players, right? Tessa Johnson, Raven Johnson, right? Pow Pow, I don't feel like they have the confidence and the mentality and the mindset or the skills to do what Fudd and Page and Strong did. Maybe later on in their careers, or maybe they're just meant to be role players. But I do know that, Chloe Kitts, she was trying to do her best. She got into a little bit of foul trouble. Strong was, playing great defense. Chloe, right? And, Malaysia and Joyce. But like those could have been those three stars the way UConn did it. They did it in a team environment. Of course, other players scored. Of course, KK did her thing. It was showing all the sauce. And Malaysia, she started scoring. Doing her little highlight reel things, but it was too late. She wasn't aggressive, and I think Don has to do a better job of getting those players ready. Like, Don, you figured it out. You know how to get the All Americans to play and buy in, right? Play hard. Now you got to get certain players on your team to break out, to take over, to know when to score, when to pass, and when to take over. And maybe, you know, f- uh, uh, Edwards and Malaysia Followay. Think that's how you pronounce her name. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. I don't know if they have had that confidence to take it over because sometimes when you have much talent on your team, or you're not used to the environment, like, should I really go take all these shots because I'm trying to be a team player, right? You don't know. So I feel like Don has to do a better job of doing that because she's already Don and the Gamecocks. They're gonna be back. They're gonna be back. She's gonna get more talent. But now you have to figure out how can I get more shooters? Because think about it, they don't really have a lot of shooters. They don't have versatile players. Think about it. You kind of has all around players. Bud, Strong, Beckers. Even KK was bringing that sauce, right? They knew what they were doing. They were diverse. They were cutting, you know, they were screening. They had multiple options, right? They were, and even if they stumbled a little bit, they knew how to get right back on track. And so, and sometimes you need a, leader, not just coaching, but it's kind of like a player, coach on the floor, right? And so that's that's paid, right, for UConn. But who is the leader for the Gamecocks, right? And also, I feel like, Gino and Don, they was really hyped up. So you could tell, Don was frustrated. So if Don frustrated, then, players gonna be frustrated. But I just feel like, oh, the trio, I mentioned the trio. This is the first trio since 2009, Uconn's trio, to score 100 points combined, right? Um, Renee Montgomery, Maya Moore, and who else? Tina Charles did it. So that's another, uh, nice stat for you guys. Oh, also, Bud, when she was the primary defender, she got a turnover, and I mean, she got a steal. When she was the primary defender, the opponent shot 2 for 10. So that just shows you. And I feel like um Holloway and Edwards, I feel like they have that star potential to break out, and it's up to them to get in that gym and build the all around game and to get that confidence and mindset. But it's also to put them in situations to succeed and max out that potential. And like I said, some people were like, "Oh, she got out coached." Maybe, maybe in the off season where all of this work begins anyway. Sometimes you can't help but do anything. Sometimes you can't do nothing in the game. When the fire is out, sometimes you can't get the fire out. Sometimes you just gotta get out the house. And quite frankly, that's that's how I feel. And like, could the claim be closer? Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Nobody, like, there was only two players for the Gamecocks that scored 10 points. And Malaysia, she scored 9. But I'm saying though, like, I'm saying though, but UConn, they was most prepared, they was disciplined, they knew exactly what they needed to do, and they were on a mission. And strong, man. Gino ain't going nowhere. He ain't retiring. You got strong is strong, man. If I feel like she might win at least 3 of them 9s. She only a freshman, and so it's like, man, Don, you got work to do. Also, think about it. Yes, they like that coach player, but think about this. In today's game, honestly, you need a guard like Page or like Flood or like, Clark. You need a dynamic guard that can play, make, and score. And I feel like this is a guard wing heavy era that we're living in now, right? Not everything is through the post. If when you have a Lauren Betts, yeah, go through the post. But I feel like, South Carolina, maybe in the portal, y'all need one of those dynamic, guards. Like, imagine if this is, I don't think this is gonna happen, but imagine if Olivia Miles, who shown she can pass and score, is on the Gamecocks. That would make a huge difference because if you look at the Gamecocks, they like to score in the paint, but nowhere else can they really dominate. They can't dominate threes, they can't dominate mid range. And so if you can only dominate in the paint, one level, people gonna clog the paint. That's what Strong did. Great defense. And I feel like their defense was very overlooked. Because you have all these scoring options, but their offense, the offense locked down. And so I think overall, I feel like all the games could have been more better. I feel like, it wasn't that drama, last 2 minutes, last 5 minutes, even. Like, you knew the game was over by third quarter, bro. And so you don't really want that to happen, right? Oh, and congrats, the Uconn Huskies, Bud. She's coming back strong, right? Paige, yeah, she gonna do big things in the W. But also, like, shout out to Fudd because I think she scored her 1,000 point 1K. That's pretty dope. Pretty dope. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, right? And tell me your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts. Type it what you like. But also stay ballin'. Until next time, peace.